Welcome back, everybody, to the Brotherhood Gaming, to our final episode in our 4-part TMNT nostalgia trip. 4 games, 4 Ninja Turtles, just all makes sense.
Now, if you're followers of our channel, you may remember that once upon a time we did a Sega Genesis vs. Super Nintendo episode on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games, which included both the Sega and Super Nintendo versions of Tournament Fighters. Well, believe it or not, they actually made an 8-bit Nintendo version of that game as well.
Yeah, one thing is for sure, this last entry is definitely probably the most unique out of all of them. How does it hold up?
The reason we say that is, well, it's because that this is one of the few fighting games actually made for the original Nintendo. It was developed in 1994, but never got a release in Japan, oddly enough. So what's the deal here? Well, for starters, the game does have a story mode. The Shredder has challenged the Turtles to a final one-on-one battle, and with no weapons. The player selects one of the 4 Turtles and first competes against the others before facing off against Casey Jones, Hothead, and finally, the Shredder himself. Also, you will have these bonus areas for you to complete, which is breaking walls in a time limit. Sound familiar? Street Fighter much?
Now, along with the story mode, the game features 2 versus mode. In one, you can face off against the computer, and with the other, against a friend. Local co-op. Good old days. In these modes, you can choose the strength level of the combatants and choose the location to do battle. And there's also a really fun tournament mode, which can house up to 4 players. And again, I love tournaments. Finally, we have the options mode, where you can adjust difficulty, continues, speed, and the gameplay. So now we have the fighting itself. The game is a 2D fighter where each character shares basic moves and has unique power moves. The first one to get 2 victories win. Of course, you can move back and forth by pressing left and right on the D-pad, but by tapping forward once, then holding toward, you can do a run. Pressing up on the D-pad will jump, and pressing down will crouch. By pressing B, you will unleash a punch, and A will perform a kick, and holding back while being attacked will perform a block.
The Turtles can perform a flying kick, flying elbow smash, and a variation of a throw move. This is done by pressing the B button while up close. Each turtle has a unique move, which are really carried over from the Manhattan Project. Leo does a spin attack, Raph does a drill, a la M. Bison, Mikey does a kangaroo kick, and Don does a roll attack. It's kind of their trademark gaming moves. Casey, Hothead, and Shredder have their own moves as well that are unique as well as their own moveset. Now, every once in a while, we have noticed that Splinter will show up and drop a red ball. Now, what is all that about? Well, in a way, it's kind of like the Smash Ball from Super Smash Bros. Once it drops, you can get it by pressing down and attack. When you have it in your possession, you can perform an Ultra attack move by pressing down and toward along with B, which is pretty much a fireball.
Now, we did not have high expectations for this game, considering that it was on the old 8-bit system. Well, those expectations were met and then exceeded. This game was surprisingly fun to play. The controls are responsive, and the game has as much depth as they could muster. Graphically, the game is also pretty strong. Each turtle has a different shade of green, and the environments are really fun to look at. They range from a sewer, a back alley, a pirate ship, and a waterfront. They are bright and beautiful and with great detail. The sound effects and the music are also some good old-fashioned Nintendo flair. I have heard a great deal of negative opinion on this game, and I kept that in mind when going into it. But I am being honest here when I say I did have a lot of fun playing this. Obviously, there are limitations here when compared to the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo ones, so bear that in mind. It is more of a novelty, but more than anything, I still felt this game that for what it is and for the console it came out on, was still just about as fun as it could be. Bear this in mind though, acquiring a copy of this game can be pretty expensive due to its rarity. I remember way back in the day, I had a Nintendo Power that covered the Super Nintendo and NES Ninja Turtle Tournament Fighter games, but I never saw the 8-bit game in stores. It almost like that game was a mirage or a myth, like, hey, did you know that they make a Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighter games for the Nintendo?
Silence your tongue! You know that there was no such thing! Well, turns out there was, and it is pretty darn good. All in all, the Turtles had a solid history on the old gray box. Any Turtles fan should try to collect for their Nintendo collection.
Well, there you guys have it. That was our fun trip down memory lane with these old classic TMNT games. Now tell us, guys, do you think we're just a bunch of biased TMNT fanboys who are just putting these games on high pedestals? Or do you think that there is some legitimate joy to be had in these old relics because they are part of our childhood? Let us know. We would love to hear from you. Meanwhile, I'm William Morris.
I'm Eugene Morris. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, if you excuse me, I'm off to play Injustice 2.
Wait a minute. Justice 2? Can I come?